Welcome back. Now, Money Smart Week SA 2023 was launched virtually under the theme Plan Your Money, Plant Your Future. Now, according to a recent baseline survey on financial literacy in the country released last month, only 46% of adults tend to live for today rather than worrying about providing for their future. 44% haven't actively been saving, and a third of South Africans have no retirement plan. And for some tips on how to make smarter financial moves by saving, we're joined by Frank Magwegwe, Head of Financial Wellness at Nedbank. Frank, good afternoon and thank you so much for your time. I mean, we just come out of July, which is the National Savings Month. There's all sorts of information on how to get your affairs in order, let alone if you're over indebted, all these instruments and levers, and yet still we find the numbers do not reflect what ought to happen around financial literacy. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. What a pleasure, what a privilege to be on your show. And it's always good, you know, during the year to get reminders of our well-being through initiatives such as Money Smart Week. Of course, you're quite right. We've just come out of the National Savings Month. So what we tend to see around this time of the year, both at Nedbank, where I head up financial wellness, but I also wear another hat where I'm a faculty member at the Gordon Institute of Business Science. So what our research tells us, firstly, like I said, it's a good reminder. However, the challenge we currently are facing in South Africa is that the interest rate increases that we've seen over the last several months, sure, they've really made it so difficult for consumers to put money aside, whether it's for general savings like emergency savings, or for any goals, let alone for retirement that you touched on. So what we're seeing is a lot of pressure on consumers. And so it comes as no surprise to us that consumers are putting a lot of focus on surviving today. Can I eat? Can I pay school fees? Do I have money to put fuel in the car? You know, can I get my kids what they want? Or even just being able to pay rent and just survive on a month-to-month. So quite a difficult challenge. Of course, what compounds it in South Africa, to link it with the baseline study on financial literacy, is that in the main, the majority of South Africans struggle with basic understanding of income, expenses. And so when you're struggling with basic financial literacy, you know, what is interest rate? What is a fixed deposit? How do I budget? That just makes it worse.
Yes, Frank, let's just take it one step back. And, you know, all these programs, especially around entrepreneurship, and before you even get into starting a small business, you need to get your personal affairs in order, which in itself is a process. It's not something you start now, you have to stick to it. There's a compound interest, which is a benefit in long-term savings. But how do you do that in this economic climate, as you're saying, where finances are constrained?
I think it's quite challenging at the moment. So I think instead of telling consumers, for example, you know, to put aside money, to have the habit of saving or budgeting, it is quite challenging. To be quite honest, in my experience, what we have seen both at Nedbank and Gibbs is that it falls on deaf ears. So what are the three things that we would do in this current environment for consumers? I think for me, the first one is to acknowledge things are a little bit difficult for most consumers, right? So is to say to them, we hear you. Things are so difficult. Most consumers are struggling to just make ends meet because expenses are high and the incomes have remained very flat in an environment that we have seen, you know, a lot of high interest rates. So just to acknowledge, it makes consumers feel that, you know, you're not talking to them without understanding concept. That's what I would say the first thing. Then the second thing, I would say every consumer must kind of understanding what is driving what's happening with their finance. In other words, we often talk about it as just kind of keeping an eye on your financial habits. Are you taking advantage, for example, of rewards that you may have as a result of your bank account, as a result of the medical aid that you belong to? Because one of the ways of managing the current tight financial condition is taking advantage of rewards, for example. So what are your habits? If you are looking at eating out, you are looking at your driving habits that have an impact right on your budget. So a holistic look at that, I think that's an important message. In addition, right, to this message of we hear you, we feel for you is tough. I think a third and perhaps even more important is the idea of tracking expenses. Just to say, when you don't know what's going on, it's quite difficult to act. And so we say to consumers, we know some consumers are saying, it's difficult. I don't want to see what's happening. It's so tough. But to do something about your finances, you need to take an honest account of what's happening. So just using all the money apps that are available out there from financial institutions to say, let me see what's coming in, what's left, and then being able to act. I think that's quite useful. I might even also throw in there the discipline of checking your credit report so that if you are falling behind payments, you are proactive in reaching those financial institutions before things get worse, such as repossession of cars, or repossession of homes, or even just having a judgment against your name.
And which is a reality for many South Africans going through financial tough times. But let's talk about delayed gratification, because there's all sorts of reasons why you would take a convenient route, load shedding. There's no time to cook. Therefore, I'll just quickly get a takeout, and then it becomes habitual. Before you know it, your money is spent in areas where you could cut down on your expenses and save as well.
My goodness, one of the key drivers, particularly in my research at Gibbs, we do see when we say people who generally report themselves, my financial well-being is high, compared to those who say my financial well-being is low. What is the one thing, or what is one of the things that we see as a big difference? Is exactly what you have mentioned, delayed gratification. In other words, people who say, I want to go on a holiday, but I don't have enough money now. Let me start putting it aside. I want to buy a car, but I don't have enough deposit. Let me put aside money for that deposit. Or even today, I want to buy clothes. Instead of me going and putting it on a clothing account, let me lay by that. We do see a big difference in well-being. So delayed gratification is a key driver. And it speaks to the point I made earlier, that really the cry that we have for consumers, us as financial professionals at the moment, is really to say, understand those habits. What's driving what you are doing with money? If you realize that perhaps I'm impulsive, perhaps I don't want to wait, so delayed gratification is a challenge for me, is then to find ways to manage that. One, it could simply be having an accountability partner, a financial coach or a financial advisor to help you. It could be sharing it with a partner that I've realized I struggle with discipline. I want instant gratification. One might even, I've seen clients who have said to me, they go to a mall and they try to make sure that they resist the temptation, of swiping the card, of paying with a phone, just reminding themselves that either I've bought within a budget or I've come for window shopping. So absolutely, for those with parents, anyone with nieces, nephews, it's an important message to inculcate in the youth that try to be a person who says, I can delay gratification. That's good in the long run for an individual's financial well-being.
And as we wrap it up, just living beneath your means. In other words, not to max out your earnings. But the percentages is suggested that at least 20% of what you earn should remain in your bank account before the month ends, so that we're not living paycheck to paycheck. Just very briefly, Frank.
Yeah, that's quite hard, but I would say, because 20% looks so huge, I would just say to consumers and to your viewers, number one, just track your expenses and see where the money is going. Once you have noticed that if you are spending beyond your means, just try to reduce it gradually. It could take you 12 months, to get to that 20% we want to save. But the important thing is to develop that discipline of spending below your means and building up, whether you start at 5% savings, you go to 10 and you go to 15. It's about the habit of saving. That's one to build there.
All right, we're going to leave it there. We really, really appreciate your time on this Sunday afternoon. That's Frank Magwegwe, Head of Financial Wellness at Nedbank, saying that, we all can trim the fat, austerity measures, tighten the belt, and track where your money is going so that your future can be secured.